Hello and welcome to the Global Trade Made Easy podcast. In this podcast, we speak to the global trade leaders, innovators, and influencers from around the world and Australia. We talk about ideas that can disrupt your organization, industry, or even careers. So let's dig in. Hello, everybody. Today, we have David Lawson, Assistant General Manager, Export Supply Chain Services from Austrade. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks very much, Tejas. It's great to be here. Looking forward to having a good chat about such an interesting topic.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. So, David, if you don't mind, for our viewers and listeners, would you mind telling us what's your role with Austrade and also what Austrade does?
Yeah, that's great. Let me start by explaining and say hello to all the listeners who are not in Australia as well. So our full formal name is, in fact, the Australian Trade and Investment Commission. It's an Australian government authority. So we report to the Minister for Trade, Don Farrell. And its genesis as an organisation goes right back to 1933. And the concept behind the birth of the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, and the reason why Australian taxpayer money goes to supporting it now, is because our job has always been to overcome the tyranny of distance. So, Australia is an island at the bottom of the world, and in many ways we're a long way away from our markets. So the Australian Trade Commission was set up to help, overcome the tyranny of distance and help Australian exporters get into markets, and also to help foreign investors as they look to get into Australia. So within the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, there is one of the divisions is solely dedicated to helping Australian exporters export. And that's called the Trade Division. So I'm one of the assistant general managers of the Trade Division. And my role is actually to look after agriculture, food, consumer exporters. And I also look after some work that we do to help Australian exporters understand some of the trials and tribulations for supply chains. So we'll probably get into the conversation a little later, but one of the biggest impacts to Australian exporters lately has been the breakdown of supply chains. So I lead a team of global engagement managers. We've got, through our extended network, including the Trade Start service, which Austrade runs in partnership with Australian state governments, we've got about 70 people all around Australia who are dedicated to working with Australian exporters to help them get into foreign markets. It's great to be leading a really exciting team.
Thanks, David. That is very interesting. The conversation will really suit to our viewers because most of the viewers are interested in exports, Australia. So there are quite a few listeners from overseas countries who wants to come into Australia and invest in. So I think it's a perfect match. Our focus will be on the exports from Australia today.
Yep, terrific. Yeah, so our offshore network, we're in around 70 countries around the world. Some very big operations based in our embassies and in our high commissions and consulates general all around the world. And so if there are any of the audience today who are interested in buying from Australia, that's the other side of our business. So they can make contact with Austrade, the shorthand for the Australian Trade Commission. They can make contact through our embassies overseas, and our business development managers can help foreign buyers get in contact with suppliers from Australia. So there's many ways I hope we'll be able to help with the conversation today.
David, excellent. Thank you for that. I understand that you have had a long involvement yourself personally, trade and exports. Would you mind telling us how did you get involved in trade and exports?
Thanks, Tejas. Actually, so I was really lucky. I was an exchange student under the Rotary program to Japan when I was 17. So I finished high school in Australia and went off to Japan. And I was hosted by a series of businessmen in their families. And so I got to live in families who were doing business, and, just really excited my appetite to learn more about trade and business in Japan more specifically. And, I came back to Australia and did my undergraduate degree and worked all the way through university. I was actually working with, Japanese industry and learning sophisticated Japanese so that I could, negotiate with Japanese. And I just always had this desire to be part of, whether I was working for a big company or a small company, that I might be able to help Australians export to Japan. So that was my original motivation. And I started a business. I had a business idea that I would help Australian exporters get into Japan. Now, I started it when I was pretty young, and I was pretty naive. So I was learning on the job. It was the University of Hard Knocks in many ways, because I learned a lot. But I decided that if I focus on things the Japanese will always want to buy, there'll always be a market. And what do people always need to buy? We'll just keep it simple. You need food, you need clothing, and you need shelter, housing. And actually where I really got the most success was in exporting houses from Australia to Japan. So I was based in Japan, and I found a Japanese architect who wanted to try to build a brick house. So I guess as an importer into Japan, I found a supplier from Australia who could pull together a kit house, and then we built a model house in Japan, and we actually used Australian bricks and all the timber and all of the things. We had to make sure that it met Japanese earthquake requirements, so it would be safe. And then once we kind of figured out how to, I guess, crack the code and try and make money from this, we started to expand the business. Now, as an Australian exporter, this is when I really understood the power of the Australian Trade Commission, or Austrade. So I became a client of Austrade, and all of the trade commissioners in regional Japan were finding customers for me. So Japanese architects and builders who wanted to import this kind of new concept of an Australian house. And in the end, I built about 50 houses around Japan, and the exporter from Australia. So I was kind of acting as the middleman, and the exporter who was bundling all of these kit houses together for me actually won an Exporter of the Year award. So we learned a lot. I didn't make a lot of money. I didn't lose money, but I learned a heck of a lot. And when I was looking to transition the business and grow, I decided to try my hand at being one of these Austrade trade commissioners, and I applied and got a job with Austrade. So it was 25 years ago now, actually, but I joined Austrade. I was the trade commissioner in Sendai, in the northern part of Japan. And then since then, Austrade has given me the opportunity to spend time in Australia. I've also been a trade commissioner and a consul general in San Francisco, in Mongolia, and I've had a number of other jobs with Austrade in Tokyo, and in Osaka. So it's been a great opportunity to apply the things that I learned as an exporter to help companies in all sectors export around the world, and not just to Japan. So it's been an exciting career, very different from what I thought it was going to be, but it's been great.
That is a fascinating story, David. That's a fascinating story. How does that? How does the progress work, right? So you become a client of Austrade, and then you become part of Austrade.
Yeah.
Excellent. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Right. So, so what I'm hearing from you is that Austrade also helps find customers. It happened
Yeah.
in your story. Does it still happen?
Exactly. That's the key thing that we do. The real value add. So what we typical path that an Australian exporter, we call them clients. A typical path might be that they approach Austrade and you know, they have an idea. I need to get into exports, or I'm exporting to one market, but I need help in getting to this other market. So my team and in other sectors, our global engagement managers and our advisors meet with the exporter, understand their business, and I guess we coach them on the basics of getting into business. Do you have the financial resources to be able to sustain a marketing push into a foreign market? Can you afford to travel and go and meet your customers? Do you have the people in the team to be able to produce the products? If you get a massive order, can you actually sustain? Can you fulfill that order? Do you have the finances to be able to to gear up to be able to meet the demand once we make the export contact? So then, we determine, okay, Malaysia might be a really good market for your particular product. And then what we do is we contact our team in Malaysia, and we brief them on who the exporter is and what their product is. And our team offshore then finds potential customers, and we introduce the product, and I guess we're the bridge builder to facilitate the conversation. And then we get out of the road and let people actually negotiate commercial deals. There's other things that we do along the way. People might get their samples might get stuck at the airport, need to get cleared by customs. So we contact our team offshore, we'll contact the brokers, freight forwarders in market, and help, remove the logjam and remove impediments to help the trade flow smoothly. So, that's the typical pattern. The reverse is also true, because our business development managers are talking every day to major supermarkets, for example, or big industrial manufacturers who suddenly need something that they figure they can get from Australia. And we get these leads. It might be for butter. Actually, a really good example was in the United States when they, with infant nutrition, so infant formula, the main manufacturer was not able to produce anymore. So it became a national emergency. And in fact, President Biden got involved. It was called Operation Fly Formula. And they were trying to find infant formula all around the world. So we took the details, our team in Washington and Chicago worked to understand the specifications. We communicated that to all of the manufacturers in Australia, and we helped a number of those crack the code and get their product into the United States. So, this is what we do day in, day out to help Australian exporters.
Nice. This is really helpful for our audience. Now, you talked about some of the ways is helping exporters even in the current environment. So, I guess at the moment we are coming out of COVID. In the current environment, how do you see Australian exporters are doing? How are they faring currently?
Yeah, great question, Tejas. And trade is so important for Austrade. We're, like I said before, we're an island nation. We have to trade, and it is just been so difficult. In all the years that I've been involved, and people are older and wiser. And if we look at the histories, it's never been more strange as it has during the pandemic. I mean, this really started in 2019 when some of our supply chains were disrupted by the bushfires. Then we had COVID. On the top of that, we had geopolitical pressures from China blocking imports from Australia for a lot of our agricultural products. But then the impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it's just never been stranger. And, if you look at the statistics in 2019, 2020 financial year, so we were exporting about $475 billion. That was the value of our exports, and that was a record high. Then the planes stopped and ships were completely disrupted, and our exports fell in, the depths of 2020 and 2021, our exports were down to 250 billion. But, this is how resilient Australian exporters are. And it's a real testament to the way that Australian exporters have had to deal with and modify what they do. At the moment, we're up to 421 billion. So, by the end of this financial year, we're probably going to set another record. A lot of that has been on the back of, tensions with the Ukraine. And, if we could produce twice as much wheat, there'd still be a world market for Australian wheat. So, it's been, from a global perspective, if you look at all of Australian exports, there are winners, but there have also been significant losers. And our job is really to help, especially those companies that are really struggling. And ag and food in particular have been, so hard hit. So, so that's what we've been focusing on, especially in my branch, working with those ag and food consumers to help them diversify into new markets.
Right. Yeah. Because of my role, I also work with a lot of exporters, and you're absolutely right. Post-COVID challenges did disrupt a lot of exporters, and I can see a lot of them are picking up in a fantastic way. So, what did you find? We talked about some of the challenges of exporters post-COVID. What are the other things you notice in terms of challenges which the exporters are dealing with currently?
So just as a little bit of a snapshot, with supply chains, we've been monitoring, flights and shipping, and with the kind of the back to normal, COVID is still here, but we're operating as if it weren't in many ways. People are traveling again, and we've been monitoring, and flights from Australia are now up back around about 75% of where they were prior to COVID. Now, the difficulty is that there is not as many freighters. Number of reasons for that. Pilots lost their qualifications during COVID because they weren't flying the hours. So we don't have as many pilots. We don't have as many crews. Because of environmental reasons, some of those big, as it were, gas guzzling aircraft, they're just too costly to fly. So the airlines, they really were hit hard. Qantas alone lost billions of dollars, as did, most airlines. And so they're putting the most efficient planes, and they're maximizing the number of people they've got. Now, that's great for people wanting to travel. It's still expensive, but because they're on smaller aircraft, narrow body aircraft, once you put the passenger and the passenger's bags, and then the airline, they're obliged to carry mail, and they're obliged to carry spare parts for their own airline, means there's not a lot of space left for air freight. So that's a continued difficulty. And we're also, we got out of sequence with the spread around the world of pallets. So we've got a shortage of pallets, and a shortage especially of food grade 20-foot containers. So both on sea freight and air freight, there are still pressures there, and that it's quite costly. The ramifications for that for companies is that you can't just get an order, ring your freight forwarder, get a container delivered, pack it and send it when you want. You need to be planning. You need to be working really closely with your importer. Some companies are actually pre-positioning more of their inventory offshore, when they can, to make sure that in anticipation for Chinese New Year, for example, or some of the big events, Thanksgiving, for example, in the US is a big, Black Monday and what was it, Black Friday, and just all those big sales cycles, especially in the Northern Hemisphere. Exporters need to pre-position. They need to think differently about how they handle their inventory and how they handle their supply. That has costs. Holding inventory longer has costs. So there's all kinds of impacts to exports.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, quite a lot of challenges, but I also see that the freight is getting a little bit easier. We deal with clients, and we hear that things are getting lot more normalized. Freight forwarders are now starting to operate, and they didn't get vessel booking earlier that easily. Now they've started, they're starting to normalize again.
Yeah.
So, David, how do you see the next 24 months, and what's next from as you see it?
Yeah, that's a big question. So on one hand, you've got the big macroeconomic pictures of interest rates and global interest rates, and is the Northern Hemisphere slowing down? Is the US going to go into recession? There are big questions like with the opening up of China. What if there's a big outbreak of COVID now? What's going to happen with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and just how unsettled all of that is. So on one hand, there's big things that we need to be mindful of, but at the end of the day, we need to keep exporting. And on the plus side, there's some really great opportunities that are especially opening up for Australian exporters. So over a series of many years, Australia has really been championing the importance of free trade. And we've won some fantastic free trade agreements over the years, going right back to the US FDA, the economic partnership agreement that we established with Japan, which was one of the most profoundly beneficial free trade agreements that Australia won in consultation negotiations with the Japanese. We've opened up in Korea, China, Malaysia and ASEAN, but we're right on the cusp of the finalization of the UK FDA. All going well, by the end of this month, that'll be ratified in the UK, and that's going to open up enormous opportunities for Australia in the UK. We're very excited about that. People will be mindful of the fact that the UK, the Brexit allowed us to open up the negotiations with the UK directly, but also we're really doing well, and we hold high hopes for a conclusion of the EU FDA, which just opens up enormous opportunities for us all across Europe. And the other one that's just come into force as well, of course, is the India-Australia Economic Cooperation Agreement, so ECTA we call it, which has just opened up enormous opportunities for us with India. Again, this is another profound free trade agreement that's been negotiated. There's just all kinds of markets there. From my sector, looking after ag and food, the enormity of the Indian market just for wine. Now, this is going to be a very long, slow story because, Indians tend to drink, men drink spirits and women drink spirits and beer, and women drink wine. So, this will be a long process, but we have really high hopes for wine in particular, but across the whole spectrum of ag and food, there's great prospects for India, and we're really gearing up and really looking forward to taking advantage of that. So, in any form of business, there's risks, but there's rewards, and it's great to be a part of really helping Australia take advantage of these great new opportunities that we're getting.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about that. So when you are talking about getting and taking advantage of all the opportunities, so what Austrade has in terms of tools and strategies that you help with to the Australian exporters grow in other markets?
Sure. Well, I guess I've already outlined the mechanics of how we do things. So if any exporters are out there and they need advice on markets, on new markets, contact us. We've got a hotline as well, 132878. So we've got people that, if you just want general information, statistics, call that number first. But, there's other ways that you can reach out to Austrade, and we can get, in a sense, in summary, it's a people business. And we are the people that can help, put a face to the negotiations. So that's our primary toolkit. But, I guess over the last couple of years, and because of, the big impact of COVID, the sudden dislocation of losing access to one of our biggest markets in China, our mantra is, and we will give this advice to anybody, is safe business is diversified business. So diversification is the key word, and we're really keen to help Australian exporters, I guess, build a whole portfolio so they've got a whole series of markets into which they're exporting, so that they can take advantage of that trade diversification. That is the key word, and that's what we are continuing to commit to help Australian exporters make sure that they're diversifying to get a balanced portfolio of export markets.
So any exporter effectively who would like to diversify their markets should get in touch with Austrade. Simple as that, right? That's the message.
Please do. Yeah, I'll say that number again, 132878. But we've got enormous resources just on our website as well, and because it's a government run organisation, so the website is pretty straightforward, austrade.gov.au, and there's an enormous amount of information, sector-specific information, country-specific information, all kinds of information. I gave a little bit of a snapshot earlier about the flights. We're now back up to 75% of all flights, so you can go there and onto that website and find the export supply chain snapshot, for example, and register there. But 132878, give us a call. There's people that man the phones that will be able to to point you in the right direction and connect. And if you're offshore and you need to get in contact and you think you want to either buy something from Australia, reach out to the Australian Embassy, our marketing team, so the Austrade trade focused team in each of our embassies, high commissions, consulates general, will be able to get you in contact with a supplier from Australia.
That is very useful information, David. We will also put all this information along with the podcast and on the YouTube as well, and the description, the links, so people can get that. Now, David, Australia as an island nation, and as you said before, we have always relied on trade, and now in this circumstances of uncertainty across the world because of the factors that you also mentioned, now we are relying on that more than ever before. How do you see Australia in the global exporting context? And what's your position from your perspective?
Look, if you look across everything that we export, there are some sectors where we are a dominant, supplier of products to the world. I'm thinking fuels and minerals, for example, energy products. We are a dominant player. But I guess, because because we are an island, we're a continent, but we're also really an island nation. Something that is a really terrific strength, I guess, for Australian exporters is that we can rely on the fact that we have very good phytosanitary rules. It's very strict when you enter Australia, as we know, going through customs and quarantine. We're very fastidious to make sure that we protect our environment. Many countries tell us that they produce clean and green. The fact is that we have a terrific track record in maintaining a very clean environment. So we do guarantee excellent quality of our produce, and that's something that we can trade on. We're building our nation brand globally to help reassure our customers that we are a safe supplier, that will never let them down, that will continue no matter what, even with supply chain disruptions, that we'll continue to strive to make sure that we can continue in partnership with our customers offshore to bring the best of our Australian produce, in particular, to markets throughout Asia. And a very big part of the Australian economy, of course, is that we're also open to investment. And so many of our big exporters and our big export industries are built on the fact that there was foreign investment to kick that off. Really great little case study in the food sector. As a company, if you go into Australian supermarkets, there's a whole shelf now for rice crackers. 25 years ago, you'd have to go to a specialist boutique Asian import grocery to be able to get rice crackers. Now, everyone eats rice crackers. We have them with dips, we have them as a snack. They're just everywhere, multiple brands. So a little story from when I first joined Austrade was this company called Sakata had made an initial investment in Australia to manufacture. Their intention was to manufacture rice crackers to export back to Japan because it's cheaper using Australian, cheaper and just great quality inputs into the manufacture of rice crackers. Well, that opened up a whole category in Australia. So we all eat rice crackers, and Sakata has a big market share in Australia. But from that base in Melbourne, they were also exporting all over Southeast Asia. So they took the concept that foreign investment from a little company in northern Japan has grown a whole category in Australia, and from that base in Australia is now exporting around the world. I was in a supermarket in Toronto one time, and there's Sakata rice crackers. It was great to see that over these decades, that investment has helped. It helps in so many ways. It builds jobs in Australia, but it also guarantees a great quality product to go around the world. And that's done in partnership through investment and then through the work that we do to help promote the exports.
Yeah, that's a fantastic story, actually. Getting the product, getting investment in Australia, then it becomes a category for Australian themselves. So very interesting. Now, if I don't ask you your involvement in some of the sectors which are some of the viewers are from, for example, meat exports industry, horticulture, grain industry, grain exports industry. We have a bulk of viewers and listeners from those industries. So what would you tell them in terms of working with you and some of the experiences that you might have in those industries?
Yeah, so look, if you're an Australian company, we'll help you if we can. But a lot of those industries are very well organised, and meat is a really good example. So Meat and Livestock Australia is the international marketing body for the meat sector. They have terrific campaigns throughout the world to really grow our the appreciation within markets of the quality of Australian meat. And just as an example, because I spent so much time in Japan, in fact, the Aussie beef logo is one of the top 10 retail logo in supermarkets in Japan, because over decades now, Meat and Livestock Australia has invested in building that brand. So in some areas, the key industry associations, they know exactly what needs to happen to grow understanding in target markets, but we work very closely with them. In some cases, a meat company, for example, or a dairy company, so they work very closely with Dairy Australia. Another, really important sector that promotes the excellence of the Australian dairy sector throughout the world, for example, might come to us and say, look, we're already in this market, but we need to find a new distributor, or we need to find some new category. So we get down and do, I guess, the guerrilla work on an enterprise to enterprise level, in partnership with those industry associations, which is so important. So in each of those sectors, whether it's seafood, whether it's wine, whether it's horticulture, what did I miss? Nuts, wool, cotton. We work really closely with all of those sectors to make sure that we're all pushing in the one direction and all putting our shoulder to the wheel to help the Australian exporter maximise the opportunities they can get from international trade.
David, this was a really educational as well as informational podcast for even me. Your examples, some of the examples that you gave, that explains how you help them. That makes it real. I would strongly recommend all the viewers who are in the exports from Australia, or you are interested in importing from Australia, get in touch with your Austrade representative in your country. Of course, in Australia, very easy to get in touch with them. Even overseas, you can get in touch with them via the website, and you will find, I'm assuming, David, the right representatives from the country. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
So we have locally engaged staff. We have trade commissioners in all our key markets. We've got you covered.
Excellent. David, thanks a lot for your time. Thank you for the conversation.
Look forward to assisting all the listeners as much as we can. Thanks very much for your time.
This has been the Global Trade Made Easy podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode of innovative ideas from trade leaders across the globe. For even more insights on global trade, visit our website at impexdocs.com.au, where we share resources for successful international trade management. Until next time, happy trading.